Welcome, my friends, to the Bob and Brad podcast. My name is Mike Keenett, and I'm a physical therapist assistant. Today, our guest is Dr. Eric Westman, and we're going to be discussing different keto topics. So, Dr. Westman is the co-founder of Adapt Your Life and Adapt Your Life Academy, an associate professor of medicine at Duke University Health System, and the director of Duke Keto Medicine Clinic in Durham, North Carolina. So, without further ado, here is Dr. Westman. All right, welcome back, Dr. Eric Westman.
Thank you.
So our first question is, what are some tips and tricks when going keto?
Sure. Well, I'm finding a lot of people are making it too complicated. The old way I was taught, which back in the day, 25 years ago now, we didn't really emphasize keto so much. It was keeping the carbs super low. And even though that it is a keto, so keto is really a state of your body. It's not a type of food. You're finding brands of keto, this, keto, that, and it doesn't mean your body will be in a keto state if you eat those things. So I'm finding that people are kind of making things a little too complicated. Just keep the carbs really low and focus on that as the main thing, eating real foods. And avoid all of the things called keto, and don't measure macros and things like that. That's just when life gets busy. If you have a complicated way of going about things, it's going to fall apart, in my experience.
Right. And you talk about total carbohydrates intake versus doing net carbs, correct?
Yes, and it's more precise. So, and the lower you go on the carbs, the stronger it is. So it's not that net carbs can't work. I've met a lot of people who use net carbs and they do great. It's kind of like an over-the-counter medicine. If you have a mild pain, for example, ibuprofen from the store is fine. But if you have diabetes, you have a lot of weight to lose, you have a tough metabolic problem like metabolic syndrome, then you may find that the net carbs isn't strong enough. And so I use total carbs. So net carbs really just means more carbs. The calculation is you subtract out the fibers and in some circumstances, sugar alcohols. So I often just changing from the net carb to the total carb calculation will make things work for folks. So if you've tried if you haven't tried total carb, you've just tried net carb and it's not working for you, it doesn't mean keto doesn't work. It just means that method of calculating the carbs isn't quite strong enough. I find when I teach people a simple method, 20 grams, that's total carbs per day or less. Some clinics use 30 total carbs or less. It'll pretty much work for everybody. I mean, if you follow it. And I can't account for those who can't seem to follow it. For some it just clicks really easily, and others it doesn't. But yeah, I use total carbs because it's just more accurate.
Right. So what are some common mistakes you see in your clinic that people make when they're going keto?
Yeah, well, first, I'm finding most people are learning from the internet, which is great. It's a great thing and a terrible thing all at the same time. So if you found someone you're learning from didn't have the same reason for doing it that you did, you might get them false idea that you could have 150 grams of fats and oils in your coffee and medium chain triglyceride and all these things, when you're not going to lose weight doing that or fix diabetes, but you will enhance your performance in the gym. So keto is just a metabolic state, but how you do it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. And in my experience, the obesity treatment, diabetes reversal world, we're not as precise, we're not as complicated or strict, and we don't make people count macros and things like that. We're not obsessed with you being in ketosis all day long. That's not the concern. The concern is results. So I think be careful from who you learn from, because there are a lot of great internet resources. People come to me having watched my work already, having lost 50 pounds. because they've already got started, and it took a while to get in to see me. So, but I do worry if you're on medications that you get taken off and monitored with those medicines safely by a medical person who understands the impact of that. But it's a great practice to be in, because I can, again, what you're trying to accomplish, I can reverse diabetes, I can reverse obesity, heartburn, polycystic ovary syndrome, fatty liver. I mean, I'm an internal medicine specialist, and I practice the best internal medicine that I ever have just by changing the food. And most internists don't know about that. They prescribe pills and shots and things like that.
Right. And I would say too, when you mentioned don't chase ketones, because I've been in keto, and I will say when I started, like, I have a ketone meter because I'm curious and nerdy, but like my ketones were sky high. But as I got adapted more, like they don't read as high. And then you get kind of, I don't know, thrown off, or you feel like you're doing something wrong, but you're still in ketosis. It's kind of weird.
There's still a lot that's to be learned about ketosis, and we call this nutritional ketosis, not ketoacidosis, which is the serious thing that can happen to people with diabetes. And we don't know yet, really. The medical world doesn't know what the best level of ketones is. It doesn't make sense to me if you've adapted to a keto state. Ketones are a fuel. It doesn't make sense to me that you would be spilling them in the urine, for example, that you would be losing a fuel. The longer you use ketones as a fuel, you're going to hold on to them. You're not going to excrete so many in the breath or the urine. You're going to find them in the blood. And even then, you might become more efficient at using the ketones, so they're not going to be as high as they used to be. So a lot to be learned about ketones, but no question it helps people to stay on track. Even a continuous glucose monitor, or a monitor that checks glucose and ketones, can be very helpful if you're, well, like you say, a nerdy, or you're just curious about what's going on, but don't obsess too much about that. Now, there are a couple conditions, like if you had epilepsy and you were treating the epilepsy with a keto diet, then you want to be very careful about having a ketone level. But most children, I don't think, measure their ketones. They're just very strict about the macros. And that's where the macro focus really came from. It's from the ketogenic diet for epilepsy or neurologic disease. But I don't ask my patients to do that. And most of my patients here in Durham, North Carolina, they're not going to do that. They don't have time. They want something simple. And I was even taught by one of my patients how to eat at a fast food restaurant. He lost 100 pounds eating at fast food restaurants. And so I've learned a lot by how to implement it in a simple way across all sorts of lifestyles.
Right. And you make like a list pretty much for people saying like these are acceptable, moderation, and don't eat these, right?
Right. Yeah. So the method I learned actually goes way back to the Atkins Center. Dr. Bob Atkins in New York City developed a list of foods, and I modified it a little bit, but not much. That's how I got started. I went to visit Dr. Atkins and the Atkins Center and said, "What do you do?" I had two patients who had success in Durham at the VA there, and they told me they did the Atkins diet. And so I said, well, let me write Dr. Atkins a letter. I ended up in his office watching what they were doing, and I proposed to him to take his list of foods that he had developed over 30 years. So really, I didn't create this. What I did, and my group at Duke did, is we studied it. So Dr. Yancey and I did the primary research to see if it was safe. I knew it could work. Two of my patients had great success losing weight, but there was still that nagging question about, is it safe? Is it really something you can do for a long time? And 25 years ago when I got into this, everyone knew it was bad for you. Everyone, and in fact, thinking back, I went to the literature to look for studies to show that it was bad, because everyone knew it was bad. But there were no studies that said it was bad. I mean, in defense, there were very few studies saying it was good. I mean, it showed you could actually lose weight, but it didn't say it was safe. But so there was an absence of data saying it was bad. So we started collecting data, and now after 20 years, I think this is one of the healthiest lifestyles you can be on, that minimizes sugar in the blood and minimizes the insulin levels and inflammation levels. So we use a simple list of foods to teach by. Some people come in and I ask them, "What do you eat?" And they say, "Well, I don't have this." No. What do you eat? Not what you don't eat. There are a lot of things you don't eat. And so the simplest way that I've found to teach someone is just say, "Here's the set of foods. Just stay to these foods." You don't have to know what a macro is. You don't have to know what a carb is. I mean, you do have to read. Although I have a colleague who does a pictorial version of it, and that's beautiful because it crosses all languages. You can have it's an international translator if everyone knows what a hamburger looks like.
Yeah.
But yeah, a simple that's my theme, and we teach that all over the place when we can, to keep it simple, not don't overcomplicate things.
Right. So are there any positive or negative long-term effects of being in ketosis?
Well, we started researching the low carb and keto diet in terms of therapeutic effect. So we started studying on the treatment and reversal of obesity. Check. It does that. I mean, that's really kind of what it's known for in the medical world, for obesity treatment. But it also reverses diabetes. And our clinical studies go way back, and there's some newer ones. But in the clinic, I mean, I reverse diabetes and obesity and heartburn and all of these other clinical issues. And so, and yes, you can reverse these things doing all sorts of other diets and other sorts of medicines and surgery, but it really has a role to play for those who can't make use of those other services. And if you just want to do things by changing the food, there's so many great things we can reverse things. So what's fascinating is there really aren't a whole lot of studies about preventing issues. And this is one of the areas that's wide open for research. If you wanted to do a study that would be fairly simple, and you just follow people on a low carb diet and see if they develop diabetes or other problems like that, because I'm confident it will, but those studies haven't been done. So the studies have been done on reversing illness and disease, and you turn it around, it doesn't mean it's going to prevent it. So if the kitty is up on the tree and I have a ladder to get the kitty down, it doesn't mean the kitty went up the ladder to the tree, right?
Right.
So I could fix diabetes with a low carb diet. It doesn't mean carbs cause the diabetes, although I'm pretty confident it's true. I'm very optimistic and encouraged about the prevention of illness, and now the time is to teach children, teach parents, get into that preventive mode where you have to be careful about sugar. And I don't mean everyone has to be keto. I have a new book that actually talks about different levels of carbs, but we're really pretty strict about staying away from refined sugar and flour. And that's a general theme among all scientists and researchers today. It's not just me at Duke saying that, but the implementation is simple and easy. And you know what? It's still to this day, I'm in the clinic and I teach people the look in someone's eyes when they come back and they go, "This is so easy. How come I didn't know about this before?" That's really fun to see.
All right. Do you?
Oh, so you mentioned about the bad things.
Yeah.
No. So the studies about true ketosis and in mice, and you can follow for the whole lifespan of a mouse, they live longer if you put them in keto, if they follow a keto diet. And so that hasn't been done in humans, although in primates, I guess there's a hint that the less you eat, the lower your insulin level in the blood for a human, even the longer you'll probably live. It's very rare to see someone who has a problem in burning fat, and that's really what's going on when you're on a keto diet. You're a fat burner. In fact, some bizarre, rare diseases get better when the body starts burning fat, and that's always very interesting to see. That I'm an internist and I'm not a genetic expert, but there's a rare genetic disease that basically gets better when you run the muscle on fat and not on sugar. So the long term, no, I think I don't know of any long term effects that's bad from eating regular food now. And so I'm saying that this is if you do a real food based kind of keto diet, nobody knows what the long-term effects are of adding, oils to coffee and apple cider vinegar every day. And, the internet keto out there, I can't vouch for, but for a real food-based kind of program where you're just keeping the carbs really low, and you're not, emphasizing being in ketosis all the time. I know that's safe. I mean, I've been following people now for over 20 years doing this. But the kind of weird versions of keto that you'll find on the internet, sometimes I do have concern that there might be long-term effects of having of drinking these oils all day long. So be careful again about who you get the information from. And I think the best sources are doctors who've been using it in the clinic. If you're trying to do it for a clinical problem, because then they have the day-to-day nuance and familiarity with how to manage the different questions and different diseases. But the keto diet that we've been using, which is a real food-based kind of program, I don't think there are any long-term complications.
All right. Yeah, there's really no long-term studies on any diet unless it's pure correlational.
Yeah.
So, all right. Where can people find more information about you at?
My website is ericwestmanmd.com. So that's EricWestmanMD.com. And you can find the different resources we have there. We have a page, we have a book, we have courses you can take on the internet. The company I started, Adapt Your Life, and the Adapt Your Life Academy has resources, free YouTube videos at Adapt Your Life YouTube channel. And you can take courses that we open from time to time at the Adapt Your Life Academy. So we're trying to give our information and teaching in many different ways. And of course, you can see me at Duke University going through the clinical program there. I have to warn you that there's a bit of a wait to get in. I'm sorry about that. That's one reason why we created this company, to get information to people who can't make the trip to Durham.
All right. You're just getting too popular, I guess.
Well, or the approach is getting popular.
One of the two, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, I've trained a number of doctors who created practices like this around the country, and that's exciting to see. So we need to train many more people in this way. Really, I use lifestyle. I use food predominantly. Some people come to me, they can't exercise. So when I say lifestyle, I really mean diet, the nutrition. And I get to take away medicines. I don't give medicines like most of my colleagues anymore.
Right. Well, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.